Breaking news out of the state of Alabama, where a three-judge federal court panel has struck down Alabama's congressional map again. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started.
Boy, Paige, this is a blockbuster ruling that we just got hot off the presses from a three-judge panel of federal judges in Alabama, two of whom were appointed by Donald Trump, one of whom was originally appointed by Ronald Reagan and then later elevated by Bill Clinton. And this is the latest chapter in the ongoing saga involving Alabama's congressional map. In this one, the federal judge panel said that Alabama's effort to remedy their last map that got struck down also violates the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and the U.S. Constitution. And even more important than that, Paige, they said that they could not explain this in any way other than to say that the state of Alabama intentionally discriminated against Black voters.
Right, Mark. And the history of this case is really complex, but to give the short version of it, for decades, Alabama was under supervision of the Department of Justice when it came time to draw new congressional and legislative districts. The DOJ or federal court had to approve the maps before they could be enacted. After Shelby County, Alabama no longer had that pre-clearance requirement. So after the 2020 census, it was really the first time Alabama drew maps without any federal oversight in decades. Now, the population of Alabama requires that there be two majority Black congressional districts in order to appropriately represent Alabama residents. Lawmakers drew a map with only one majority Black district. Multiple lawsuits were filed over the map. It went up to the Supreme Court, went back down. Supreme Court got involved again. But ultimately, federal court said under the Voting Rights Act, Alabama does need to have two majority Black congressional districts. Lawmakers tried to get around this court order. They didn't want to follow the court's direct ruling. And today, Mark, a federal court affirmed once again, Alabama needs to follow federal law and not discriminate against its Black voters.
Yeah, and this is just an absolute stinging defeat for the state of Alabama. I mean, this was as favorable a panel as Alabama could hope to draw. They fought this, as you say, going to the U.S. Supreme Court. And let's be honest, this is as favorable a U.S. Supreme Court as Alabama could hope to have. And they lost before the U.S. Supreme Court. And, you know, rather than do what a rational state would do, or even a state that is slightly irrational, and just comply with the court's order. Comply with the court's order in a way that maybe they don't like entirely, but at least they can make some political choices. They just, like the famous picture of the governor of Alabama from the 1960s standing in front of the schoolhouse doors, you know, with his arms crossed saying, I'm not going to let Black students register here. It is like the legislature just crossed its arms and said, we're not going to draw a map with two Black opportunity districts. We're just not going to do it. And they just were in defiance of this court's order. And this is what happens when you are in defiance of a court order, you know, maybe not technically in the contempt sense, but you know, where you're not doing the thing that a court has told you to do, you're going to wind up with an ever increasing sequence of more hostile rulings. And it is a very big deal. And everyone needs to hear this and understand this. It is a very big deal for a federal court to say that a state has violated the Voting Rights Act by undermining Black voting rights. But it is a catastrophic deal for a state in 2025 to have been found to have intentionally discriminated against Black voters. This is not a, you know, the Voting Rights Act is a very complicated law and we didn't get it exactly right. You know, that's honestly what Louisiana says, right? Louisiana's argument in that case was, you know, Voting Rights Act, very complicated. We thought we got it right. We didn't get it right. You told us what we had to do. We did it. You know, that should be the end of the story. Of course, we've done lots of videos about that not being the end of the story because more lawsuits came from the conservative side. But with Alabama, what the court is saying is that when you went back to remedy this map, you intentionally discriminated against Black voters.
Right, Mark. And the court very clearly said that. They say in this ruling, Try as we might, we cannot understand the 2023 plan as anything other than an intentional effort to dilute Black Alabamians' voting strength and evade the unambiguous requirements of court orders standing in the way. Now, Marc, Alabama's current congressional map was enacted by a federal court. It was drawn by a special master. That map was in effect for the 2024 election, and in Alabama's new second majority Black congressional district, voters elected Shamari figures. And this is the first time Alabama has two Black members of Congress at the same time. Now, Marc, what happens now? What does the state of Alabama have to do? What is the court going to do? Is there going to be a new map? Are there going to be new districts? What's next?
Yeah, so I mean, the immediate next steps is that Alabama needs a map, right? We continue to play this hopscotch game in Alabama with, remedial map, hearing, court decision, legislature, remedial map. We keep going around here. And the map that was used for 2024 was a court-drawn map, that was passed because of all of what we're talking about. So, I mean, the question will be whether that map stays in place moving forward, or there is a different configuration. The fact is, this court has made very, very clear, very, very clear, that there are going to be two majority Black districts. So it is I suspect that the existing court-drawn map or something very close to it is likely what we're going to see continued for the rest of the cycle, but that has to get formalized. That's kind of like the what I will call the shark closest to the boat.
Marc, and something we have talked about a lot and has come up in politics recently is what kind of punishment exists if you ignore a court order, if you don't follow a judge's instructions. And it seems like the panel here is ready to take action to give Alabama some consequences for failing to follow its order to draw a map with two majority Black districts.
Yeah, so it's very interesting you say that, Paige, because one of the themes that we at Democracy Docket have been covering in a lot of our videos, frankly, around Donald Trump, has been this notion of what happens when litigants don't follow court orders. What happens when the Trump administration says, that's nice, Your Honor, that you issued that order, but we don't comply with it, or we don't think we have to comply with it. And by the way, if you have not seen those videos, you can find them all on Democracy Docket's YouTube channel. You can also, by the way, take this opportunity to click the subscribe button at Democracy Docket to make sure that you are kept abreast of all of the videos as we post them. We do a lot of breaking news, and it's a way that we keep you informed. But Paige, the fact is that you're right, that part of what the court is saying here is you, Alabama, when you went back to redraw this map, you intentionally discriminated against Black voters. But the other thing that the court is saying in the quote that you read earlier is that the state of Alabama essentially didn't comply with the court's order, right? And those are two different things, right? One is you intentionally drew a map violating Black voting rights. The other is you intentionally drew a map violating our court order. And in that second instance, a court could find contempt. I don't think it's going to do that here. Instead, what it is looking at is to remedy the first provision with a flavor, certainly, to remedy the first problem, which is the violation of Black voting rights, with a flavor of the second, which is you didn't follow our order, is to bail them into the pre-clearance regime. There used to be, under Section 5, a requirement that states covered by those provisions before they could even draw redistricting maps had to get them pre-cleared by the Department of Justice or by a federal court in Washington, D.C. That's what Shelby County struck down. And what the court is saying here is we're going to hold a hearing in light of the fact that you drew this map knowing it would violate the voting rights of Black Alabamians, and in violation of what we told you had to do, to see whether you should be bailed in. And that would be beyond breaking news. I mean, that would be like a seismic earthquake, because, for Alabama to have gotten out of preclearance in Shelby County, after all, Shelby County is in Alabama, that case comes from, for them to now find themselves potentially being bailed back in, I think is 99% that they violated the rights of Black voters. But Paige, there has definitely got to be that 1% to the judges being like, and by the way, you should be following court orders. And And, it really is, I think, if you travel the gamut from the Trump cases involving immigration and migrants and Alabama here, you have two pretty good bookends of what the modern Republican Party has become, which, by the way, is not what the modern Republican Party has become, which is a party that simply, doesn't take federal court orders particularly seriously.
Marc, obviously the big question anytime a court decision like this comes down is, okay, won't Alabama just appeal it? Won't a higher court overturn this decision?
Okay, so because this is a 3-judge panel, it goes directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there is no intermediate court. This is one of these weird areas of the law where there is what's called direct review or direct appeal. So they will, when the dust settles on all this, they could appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm not sure that the U.S. Supreme Court is looking for another opportunity to have another redistricting case set for argument and decision. I mean, remember, Alabama's been there once before on fundamentally similar issues, not the bail-in issue, obviously, but fundamentally similar issues, and they lost. Louisiana is currently before the U.S. Supreme Court, where, as we're recording this, we're still awaiting a decision in an argued case out of that state that involves racial gerrymandering of their congressional map. And as you know, there have been other cases that the Supreme Court has had to accelerate on their docket, largely because of the Trump administration's failure to comply with court orders and their unhappiness at losing cases. Not entirely that, but the court has a very busy docket right now of what I will call, for lack of a better term, political type cases. Not cases of company A suing company B, but cases where there's political interest. I'm not sure that the Supreme Court is going to look to give one of those slots once again to Alabama, particularly where Alabama lost the last time before the Supreme Court. And let's not forget, this is now the second time, Paige, in I don't know how many days that we've been talking about a judge appointed by Donald Trump who has dealt a significant blow to Republicans in an election context. The other one was obviously in North Carolina, where the federal district court judge there essentially ended the months-long effort by Republicans to steal a state Supreme Court seat. But I do think the Supreme Court in this case would be looking at whether to set it for full argument. And they'd be looking at the panel and they'd be thinking, well, if this is the panel that said that they did this, and we've already heard the case once before, earlier version once before, and ruled in favor of this panel, I think that all that makes it less likely. It doesn't mean Alabama won't try because they are shameless and they have been defiant this long. So I assume they'll continue to be defiant, but I don't think they're going to have a lot of success. But look, everyone, this is why Paige and I do these videos. If you have noticed, there has been an increased number and increased frequency of videos that she and I are doing, particularly on topics involving breaking news, because what you have told us in a lot of the feedback we get from you is that you like video content. You like to get the breaking news, not just on the Democracy Docket website, not just in our free daily and weekly newsletters or in our premium content, but also on YouTube in these videos. So please do us a favor. Go ahead, click the subscribe button. Also hit the bell to make sure you are notified when there is new content posted, as there is a lot these days. You'll get all of that for free. And always make sure you are subscribed to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters. And if you want premium content, you can do that as well. The link for that is above and in the show notes below. Thanks for watching this episode. We'll see you next time.